dear listener. You're back with Marty Zylstra for the Too Much Information podcast. And thank you for listening to episode 1. We're on episode 2 now, so if you haven't heard episode 1 and you want to be filled in on the story, go back and listen to episode 1. And thank you for joining us. So I was talking to you last week about my musical journey, and the reason I'm telling you these stories is because I want to get to know you. I want you and I to know each other very, very well, and I want you to communicate to me what you would like to hear in the podcast going forward. If you have any thoughts, comments, suggestions, I would love to hear them. You can catch me on my socials, and I will update you with that information at the end of this story. Now, where we ended was my kind of early history of music, which was playing in punk rock bands in high school and playing in a little pop band or funk band in kind of high school, post-high school time. And I was kind of a late bloomer, and I wasn't sure what I wanted to do post-high school. So what I did, like a fool, or no, not like a fool, I waited, and I wanted to decide what I wanted to do, so I took my time in figuring that out. And so college, I'd kind of decided, hey, I should have a backup plan for music, because I thought, well, I'm going to be a musician. That's just a foregone conclusion. But also I need a backup plan, and the backup plan is to go to college for business. So business seemed generic enough. It seemed to be in the wording music business, if you will. So it made sense to be in college for business because the music industry has a business component, and I thought I would learn something. So I started that. And at the time, I had been in a band, and that band had disbanded, or I had kind of screwed it up, and I'll tell you that story another time, but the long and the short of it is, the band had broken up, and I was without band, briefly. And I filled in with a couple of friends, Dave and Brian Dukowich, old pals of mine who were sort of dabbling in electro at the time, and they're old pals of mine, and they said, why don't you come down and you can play keyboards, drums, or whatever you want to do on our music. And I did. I actually ended up playing a gig with them on drums, and I played bass or something, or keyboards. I don't even know what I played. It was like a short set. But I wasn't too happy with my music career at the time, so I went out and rented some gear. I rented a microphone and a 8-track, and I decided I wanted to be solo or go start another band and write some songs and see what would happen. And of course, at this point in my musical journey, I didn't know what was going to happen. I kind of think that if the story had gone differently, I don't know if I would have carried on. To be honest, I don't know where my life would be. But as fate would have it, and as this demo went along, I recorded this demo, I put it out, I printed some CDs. I kind of did it an old school way. Just printed some CDs and handed it out to some friends and classmates in college. And then those demos, they weren't very good, but they were something, and I felt like I was at least moving forward, and maybe I'd put a band together, or maybe I don't know. I don't really know what that was going to do or what I was going to do with that, but maybe that was the precursor to future artists or future song. Sort of started a foundation of a DIY, which is write the song, record it, and then play it for people, which I still do to this day when I write a new song. So anyway, I had this demo, and I was on my way sort of thinking about being in another band and looking for an artist to play with, or what was I going to be in a band? Was I going to play guitar in a band? What was I going to do? And it was about January, February, I believe 2002, when in Victoria, I was living in Victoria at the time, I found a local board for musicians, and there was a couple guys looking for a singer. They kind of had an idea of the band, what they wanted, the aesthetic of the band, which was Beatlesy band with like a John Lennon-y kind of front man with elements of The Who and elements of David Bowie. So kind of a glam vibe, kind of a Beatles vibe, lots of harmonies, lots of big choruses, and that's what they were looking for. And they were looking for a specific type of singer. And so I on a whim sent an email, and I had been kind of auditioning people, or people auditioning me at that time. I even went to a 17-year-old, 18-year-old's mom's basement sort of thing, and were jammed out one time with a guy. And no disrespect, it just was trying on a bunch of hats, trying to make something work. And so I answered this message board ad, and they wanted to meet. So I met up with now my friend Lucas Renshaw, who was a very, unbeknownst to me, talented drummer, right in my wheelhouse, which is favorite drummers Keith Moon, Ringo Starr, a little bit 60s elements, lots of 60s elements in his playing. And him and I had a very similar sense of humor and a similar vibe. We wanted the same things. He was a cool-looking dude with leather jackets and tight pants, and at the time that was really big with the Strokes coming up. And so we got in a room and jammed. And it was me and this drummer, Luke, and then a guitar player named Travis, and another guitar player named Rolla. And there wasn't a bass player yet. We were trying to work that out. We had a few ideas. There was a former bass player friend of mine who might have worked, at least temporarily, and I believe he even played with us. And so we jammed, and it was great. And the whole idea with the band was everything was sort of, there was a vision for everything, and a vision for the music, vision for the look, vision for the gigs we wanted to play, and we wanted to do something different, and we wanted to do something bigger. Something that none of us had done really to that point, which was put something together that could transcend anything we had ever done individually. And so we convinced a bass player to play, and a local guy who was very, very talented bass player, who played in a number of bands. Velvet in Victoria, very famous for being the house band at Steamer's Pub, no longer there, but he was there for years and years and years. And so Lee came down, and I think he recorded with us, or we like DIY'd our recording a little bit, and Travis was a very proficient expert at music, and he could mix us and record us and engineer us, and that's what we did. We recorded, I think, 2 songs or 1.5 songs or something, and that one song, so this was about, say, call it April or May of 02. So April or May of 02, we took that song, which was not mixed, really just kind of off the floor live, not really mastered, just kind of what we could do, and just a really good volume. Took that tune down to the local radio station, which is 91.3 The Zone. Took it down there to then the program director, Al Ford, Rockin' Al Ford, who was there at the time, played it for him, and he loved it right away. And he said, there's an initiative on the Zone, some kind of like monthly band type vibe where the station played your song every hour on the hour or something for a week or a month, I don't even know. And then at the end of it, you played a gig. So, and the gig was at the local pub, Steamers. So what did? We got to be the band of the month right away. Like, this whole thing kind of started sort of exponentially growing quickly. And then, so we got this band of the month thing, and that was big. And then we decided to do a CD pretty quick along there. I don't even know the release date, and that doesn't matter. But the point is that some friends of ours, we phoned around, and we got friends of ours to book us in for this Montreal group that was kind of up and coming, a new artist from Montreal, a 4-piece singer-songwriter guy who was kind of in the vein of all the stuff we liked, which was Canadian pop. And Montreal was exploding at the time with different bands. You had the Stills, you had Stars, you had Leslie Feist, you had Broken Social Scene. And then you had this singer-songwriter, Sam Roberts, who was just starting to take off in Canada. And I had never heard of the guy, but we got this gig at Lucky Bar in Victoria, and we were just college kids, college age. And we decided to play, or we got on stage with this guy, and we played, and we had a blast. It was our second or third show. Maybe our second or third show. And these guys, this band was absolutely incredible to play with and perform with. We had a blast. My whole thing at the time was kind of being a really reckless kind of frontman, similar to Robert Plant or that type of thing. I think if John Lennon had been, just a singer or something with a bit of, Robert Plant in him a bit more maybe. And so maybe even Iggy Pop combined, because I've always loved punk from my days of learning music by Nirvana, and Green Day and pop punk in the 90s, and kind of grungy bands like Eddie Vedder was a bit of an influence, throwing the mic in the air and twirling it. And anyway, so that was my thing. And then we opening for this other band from Montreal. They blew us away, and we just loved hanging out with them. And there was like 20 people in the audience in a room that holds 200 people. Not a big room, not a big audience, but we had a blast. And then I think what ended up happening was that band sort of hung out with us the next day or something. And then the next day after that, they were in town for a little while. They had some time to kill on their tour. So we got to know these guys. And then they said, when we come back, we'll have to hang out again. And that was that. That was about July of 2002. And so little did we know, Sam's record took off. And he ended up having a number one hit on rock radio in Canada and mainstream radio. And so little did we know he was going to get the tragically hit Canadian tour later that year and back into Victoria. And so we ended up going to his show and hanging out with him. And then we just got to know these guys even better and better. And they became friends. And they said, when we're back in town, maybe you could play the shows. And so we said we would love to. And so they went on their way. But that summer we played a few shows in and around kind of Victoria and Nanaimo. And I think we had even started thinking about getting over to Vancouver. I'm not sure if we did until later that year. But we got a call from the Sam Roberts people. They wanted us to open and do their tour. So for us, for me personally, that was a big deal. Because as soon as I got in this band, everything we did turned to gold. We had this like Midas touch, we called it. Everything we wanted to do, we kind of got. And as we went along, we started to realize that we really had something here. And the songs, and I'm going to play you this song right now. It's called Love Me Down. We realized that we had something really cool going on, and the band was called Grace Nocturnal, and people still talk about this band to this day. I don't know why, because it was very short-lived, but we had a lot of fun, and we got to do a lot of cool things, including national or West Coast tour with the Sam Roberts Band, and also a West Coast tour with Tegan and Sarah, the wonderful Canadian duo, and got a chance to hang out with them and perform with them on the same stage. So we really got a chance to quickly experience things that you wouldn't get to experience if I had been just a solo artist. And so let's hear this song.
Give me a look and it's down the road. She's all like she's on medicine. Baby, baby, I wanna be your sin. 1 o'clock, I move too slow. I decide to try to never, I wanna go. The diamond mines are such a find. Baby, baby, I think I know your kind. All the boys down after school try so hard just to play it cool. Makeup, hair just right. Sounds like it's gonna be a fight tonight. 12 o'clock and I hit the show. Give me a look and it's down the road. French kisses in the medicine. I think the song is sinking in. Been around town 1,000 years. I've seen it cry about 1,000 tears. I've seen it face about 1,000 times.
So as you can hear, it's got energy. It's got a lot of feeling, and it's a short tune. I think radio liked it at the time because it was short. So that meant that it didn't matter if, they could play it right after a commercial or right before a commercial, or they could put it between weather and the news. So we got a lot of spins, actually quite a lot locally, which doesn't really happen anymore for just an indie band to record a demo, basically, and put it on the radio. So that was crazy, and it's still crazy to think about. People still talk about this band to this day. And so when we got the tour with Sam Roberts, what ended up happening for me personally, in my experience, was, so we did the 2 dates at the Commodore Ballroom in Vancouver, and then a date in Victoria, and then later on we do another date with them when they came back out. So, but playing a sold-out show at the Commodore is something I mean, I didn't know what that would be like, to feel like that. Fronting a band where I am the singer and I am in front of a large audience. That feeling, that first feeling of walking out, I mean, I had a lot of nerves, and I was afraid I was going to forget the lyrics, and I was afraid I was going to lose my voice, and I was afraid that people weren't going to like us, but I got out there and I started singing, and it's like nothing. I'd never experienced anything like that in any previous band, which is performing on a stage in front of an extremely large audience that was open to hearing and listening and being a part of something. And I think the way we looked was really powerful. A 5-piece band with leather jackets and rock tees and, Beatle boots and long hair, and that was a powerful image. So I think what ended up happening for us was that the 5 of us were bigger than the sum of our parts, and so you could really get a sense that there was a lot of charisma there, and it rubbed off on people, and people got it right away. And that year, 2003, from January till the end of the year, was some of the craziest sort of events of my life, of my formative years musically, playing with big bands and playing with doing a tour. I'd never done anything like that really before. I was from a small town in Northern Ontario, as my first podcast episode suggests. I was just a punk kid going to college, and the funny story about that year is I think it was the end of my 2-year program. I was in a 2-year program, and I got back from a tour and I failed an exam because I had been on tour and I missed a class, and they had an exam and I missed it, or something along those lines. I forget the story, but so I ended up having to take a class again in September, and I ended up continuing on with college. And I remember being super bummed out because I wanted to finish so I could move on, but I also wanted to see where the band was going to go all at once. So I had all these mixed emotions at the time, and I was dating a girl in the Lower Mainland, and I was living on the island, so I was traveling back and forth a lot between gigs and between rehearsals and between work. I had a bit of work at the time too, and college, and all of that combined. I didn't know what was going to happen, but I remember September or October, things started to kind of change a little bit with the band, and there was a bit of tension because we weren't sure what to do next. We wanted a recording deal with a Canadian label, and we had a couple of irons in the fire, and our friend who was managing us at the time, Matt, he was communicating with lawyers, and we were meeting with people, and there was a lot of optimism, but it wasn't moving quick enough, in the sense that at the time I thought everything we had touched to that date turned to gold immediately, and I felt that it wasn't moving quick enough or something, and I think we were all kind of getting restless. We wanted a full-length record. We were kind of performing on an EP that was reflective of us kind of at the beginning of the band, which is only a year and a half into its existence, but we wanted something a bit bigger and a bit more epic, and we wanted to keep momentum moving forward, and we just couldn't hold it together. And we played a show on New Year's Eve in 2003 at the Media Club in Vancouver, and it was a memorable moment because I got to meet a lifelong friend of mine, Adam Fink, who is in a lovely band called Actors, and him and I have been friends since that day. But even I was restless, and I was thinking about maybe being a solo artist still, because some of the songs I was writing, I don't know if the band was really wanting to perform, which was fine because they didn't fit. I was still writing a lot, and they were writing, and it was really hard to keep it together. So, because the personalities were so strong. And sure enough, about 3 or 4 weeks after that gig, the band ended. I had moved to the Lower Mainland, and they called it quits. Even though I was willing to travel back and forth, the band called it quits. And so I'm going to play one more song by Grace Nocturnal, and we'll light a candle for that band, and we'll wonder what could have been, because certainly the sky was the limit, but sometimes, it's better to burn out than fade away, and remember the highs and not the lows, because we sure had a blast, and I'm glad I did it, and I'm glad I learned from it, and I'll never, ever forget it. This song is called City Limits. I really hope you enjoy it. She must have been a devil to make my dreams come true. Staring at a red hot rebel, she says something to you. She says, "No city after Dear listener, thank you for listening to episode 2 of my podcast. That's where it ends tonight. Next time on Marty Zylstra, Too Much Information, the podcast, we're going to get into where my music career went beyond college, and I'm really excited for you to hear about it. I'm going to leave it here. Please connect with me on my socials at Marty Zylstra Music on Instagram, at Marty Zylstra on Twitter, and at Marty Zylstra Music on Facebook. I was thinking we could have a mailbag. Please ask me some questions. And at the end of the story about my music career getting to today, so once we get to today, the precursor to the release of my new album, which we'll talk about, I would like to hear questions from you. Questions like, how do I start a band? How do I write a song? Why do you do it? Why wake up in the morning? Why play music? Are we going to survive the apocalypse? Any question you have, I'd love to hear from you. I'll put it into a podcast. Coming soon will be guests, and we'll have features, and we're going to talk about bands and people that like those bands and people that I love that like those bands, and it's going to be a blast. We're going to have a good time. Thank you for listening to Grace Nocturnal and the story of that band. I can't wait to see you next week.